And welcome. Thanks so much for being with us today. Again, starting the beginning of your week with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Please welcome back to the program. He's the co-founder of the Media Equality Project and editor-in-chief of MediaEqualizer.com. We've got Mr. Brian Maloney back with us. Brian, good morning to you, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So on Friday, I was prepping for our interview, Brian, and we were going to talk a little bit about Dianne Feinstein and Brett Kavanaugh and, this letter that she's been sitting on since June and everything else. And I know we're still going to talk about that, but we've had some new developments because the accuser is now accusing the nominee for the Supreme Court, Brett Kavanaugh, of sexual misconduct. What do you make of this?
Well, I do think that you hit the correct point first there, and that is, what was Dianne Feinstein doing sitting on this thing? So now we've got this situation where, we can't proceed with this until this has been investigated. Well, Feinstein has had this for months. And so now, conveniently, she drops this at the 11th hour when it can do the most political damage. And look, what Democrats are trying to do here is stall the vote until after the November election. That way they can win control of the U.S. Senate, win control of Congress, and then scuttle this whole thing, and then Trump will never get anyone he wants confirmed. So that's what all this is about, is trickery. So, am I going to be able to sit here and say that this didn't happen 35 years ago in high school or whatever? No. But, I mean, if you're able to look at this and not feel like it's become a theater of the absurd, I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's absolutely ridiculous what's going on.
Yeah, you are exactly right. I also think that there's probably some fundraising to some of this. I know a couple of weeks ago up at MediaEqualizer.com, back when Cory Booker was having his grandstanding Spartacus moment, they were sending out emails, fundraising, trying to, they want to run for president, some of these people.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question that all this has been an opportunity for, seeing which Democrat looks strongest going into 2020. So there's that. But I just think that Feinstein, I mean, she has no excuse, for sitting on something for 3 months and then dropping it when it's politically timed to this extent. So, but, I mean, the bottom line is that Kavanaugh has now had his reputation smeared. I don't know why anybody would ever want to be on the Supreme Court, run for president, run for office, do anything anymore, because it's all about trickery. And it's all about sliming people at the worst possible moment. And, I mean, think about it. We're actually now seriously talking about what Kavanaugh may or may not have done in high school. I mean, high school. So, I mean, if you can look at this and not shake your head in disbelief, I think we're in a very, very sad state of affairs.
No, there's no doubt that we are. So this is a delay tactic. I agree with you. That does sound right. They're trying to delay this because they know if they can torpedo his nomination, it's going to be a while before Donald Trump gets another one. It will be after the election, but before there's another nomination. What are your thoughts on this, Brian Maloney, in terms of, the vote, I believe, is scheduled for Thursday. You have one Republican, Jeff Flake, saying we don't need to vote. We need to delay it. What do you think? Or do you think they'll go ahead and stand firm? The White House, as of last night, was standing firm by Kavanaugh's denials, and they were going to move forward. What's Chuck Grassley going to do? What are you hearing?
Well, I think, notice how it is one of the most liberal Republicans in the U.S. Senate, Jeff Flake, one who's also on his way out the door, who was the first to jump out and say we need to delay this, almost in tandem with the Democrats. I mean, it's like this whole thing was choreographed by the left ahead of time. Now that, look, should they look into this? I guess so. I don't want to sit here and attack this woman except to say that, she does have a history of left-wing activism, of far-left activism that was immediately apparent. There are also some rumors going around I don't want to get into too much yet until we have some more information. But, there's a lot going around, so we need to look into motives. But the bottom line here is that anyone looking to be confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court in the future is susceptible to any person out there who writes a letter.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Welcome. On this Thursday, thank you so much for being with us. If you're just joining us, maybe this is the first time that you've ever heard about Conduit News Radio. Well, congratulations. You found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality where we are building a liberty machine here, and we're so glad that you're with us. The phone number, 870-275-9799. As always, call or text 870-275-9799. We're broadcasting as well on Facebook and YouTube and live stream. And, we really appreciate all of the opportunities, out there. All the platforms, I guess I should say. There are other platforms we could try too, Joe, right? Like there's Periscope and all these. No, there's not Periscope? Well, Joe is shaking his head vehemently saying, no. I'm just saying there are other places that you can stream as well. Good. I'm sorry, Joe. I'm sorry. Anyway, so we've got a great show for you. We've got a lot of information to get to. There's been some good breakthroughs. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. That the Mac building at the Marble Palace in Little Rock, that's where the legislators normally, scurry off to when they want to conduct proceedings that are not on the record, not recorded, not live streamed. Looks like there's now support to put cameras in the Big Mac room, and that is certainly a welcome idea. We'll talk more about that here in a minute. We've been calling for this for a very long time, and we'll talk about what the next step needs to be after they do start to record in the Mac building as well as in Senate committee rooms like they already do in the House. Also, at the top of the next hour, you know what I'd like to do at the top of the next hour? I would like to go through these ballot initiatives one by one. I want to tell you the good, the bad, the ugly. And we're going to go through them because a lot of people have asked that question. They've asked, hey, well, we know about issue 1. We've heard you talk about issue 3, but, what about the rest of them? What about issue 2? What about issue 4? We'll talk about those coming up at the top of the next hour, as well as there's a great Conduit for Action policy piece just specifically on why issue 1 is so bad. We can dive into that as well. Okay, so let's start here this morning with this piece on what Jeffrey Toobin. Now, I don't really care much for what Jeffrey Toobin says on CNN. I don't really care for anything that CNN broadcasts for the most part. But I will say this. When you have somebody like CNN who is, ultra-liberal, you have somebody like Jeffrey Toobin who is, trying to mask himself as, objective when, it's very clear that he's not. CNN's Jeffrey Toobin said the other day that that Kavanaugh, meaning, Brett Kavanaugh, is going to get confirmed if the accuser doesn't testify. Yesterday we saw headlines, after I got off the program yesterday, you see headlines, will she, won't she? Will she testify? Won't she testify? And they're saying, well, we need an FBI investigation first. This is what the left is saying. We want the FBI to investigate what? What are we going? I mean, you have this guy, Brett Kavanaugh, who's been a part of what? He's been investigated or vetted by the FBI 6 different times. And none of this has ever come up. I think, when you introduce this letter that, you've had, or there's been some people that have had knowledge of it since July, and you introduce it at the last minute, and it really is. I mean, for us to take you as sincere, I mean, we're supposed to, right? We're supposed to be, sincerely concerned about this. Well, if it's at the 11th hour, then there should be some motivation to get to the bottom of it, right? And this is all it's getting to the point where it's really hard to suspend a disbelief at this point. I mean, I think a lot of people are trying, because of the seriousness of the allegation. People don't automatically want to be like, oh, this is politics. But I think most people agree that this is politics. I mean, I think most people in their gut, they're like, yeah, this is politically motivated. This accusation is a politically motivated accusation, especially when you take into account that they've had it since July and we're just now finding out about it. And listen, I know she wanted originally to be anonymous, but what kind of person sends a letter wanting to remain anonymous? What are you supposed to do with that? I mean, I'm just saying this woman here, Christine Blasey Ford, she had to know that her name was eventually going to be made public. She had to know if you write a letter like that. I don't know. I don't buy any of this, and I think right now what is essentially happening is a lot of people are having to. You want to give the benefit of the doubt, but then you've got to get to a point where you actually testify and you get questioned by a committee. Now, I don't think this woman, I think right now, will she testify, won't she testify? Well, is it going to be under oath? Are we talking about, you're going to testify under oath? It needs to be. It needs to be under oath. And I think maybe we have a little bit of, maybe she doesn't want to go under oath, because if she is in fact, doing this at the last minute because of, the attempt to try to politically torpedo. And I saw there's some photos of her. Did I see that right? Joe, will you find this? Christine Blasey Ford, where there's some photos out there of her, protesting Donald Trump, not my president, I think, something like that. Somebody told me that. I actually haven't seen the photo, but so I want to make sure we get that right. But you gotta think that if you go before Congress and you're under oath and it's found out that you're lying and you're doing all this to try to delay the proceedings and the work of the United States Senate, that if you do that, then yeah, they'll go after you for perjury, 100%. The left is saying, no, we want the FBI to investigate first, and then we'll testify. Wait. I don't know. It's just, we're supposed to pretend that this is not a delay tactic, that this is all, that this is all, the way things normally go, right? And it's not. I mean, if you look historically, this is not how a Supreme Court confirmation process goes. This is not. I mean, there are examples, Bork, Thomas, but if you look at the confirmation process, it is a very historically, and really, to my dismay. I mean, I know when Barack Obama was nominating, Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan, I had some problems with Republicans being like, well, this is the consequences of President Obama winning his election, and the justice is a qualified justice, is what they would say. It was about the judicial qualifications, not about this type of stuff. But we live in a world now where an allegation, one allegation, and the allegation alone is going to disqualify an entire, career of judicial service and judicial qualifications. We no longer can consider those because of one allegation. I saw a video on Facebook the other day that was comparing how Robert Bork, in his failed nomination, how that was handled compared to how Justice Clarence Thomas handled those allegations with Anita Hill. And, of course, Clarence Thomas famously said this is a high-tech lynching, and history really shows that at that point, the naysayers were basically, kind of backed into a corner, and they looked ridiculous. Matter of fact, we were just showing you an article. This CNN's Jeffrey Toobin, Kavanaugh getting confirmed if accuser doesn't testify, okay? That is an article that is on Breitbart.com. You realize the late Andrew Breitbart was once a big liberal. Well, he was somebody who was on the left. I think he went to Tulane University. He was a big leftist and everything else. And if you listen to what he said that the beginning of his transformation was the nomination of Clarence Thomas to the Supreme Court, and him seeing what the left really thinks of a minority, if that minority doesn't think like the left believes somebody who's a minority should think. And we're seeing this amplified in our society even more now. And it all comes down to what the definition of diversity is, right? And diversity, according to the left, is only about appearance and looks. It's very superficial. Diversity, excuse me, I've had a sore throat for a couple of days. Diversity, to the left, is very superficial. It is all about looks. What's the color of your skin? Okay, you're this shade of color. Okay, good. We need somebody a little lighter than you and a little darker than you, and then a little lighter than that person, a little darker than that person, and boom, diversity. Look at how diverse we are. It's all about skin color to the left. It is not about a divergence of thought, a difference in thought and ideas or principles. That is not diversity to the left. Diversity is only about appearance. It's only about the physical. We need someone skinny. We need someone a little larger than the skinny person and a little skinnier than the skinny person. Oh, wow, that's diversity. It's very superficial. It's very shallow. It's very high school. The left's definition of diversity. Folks, I'm telling you, when you have somebody who meets their affirmative action goals, okay, and you would think that if you go back to where it was with Clarence Thomas, right, going to be a black Supreme Court, he's black, going to be a Supreme Court justice. Oh no, but he's conservative and believes that the Constitution says what it says. From an originalist standpoint, oh no, we can't have that. That's a diversity. It really is diversity, right? But it's one we have to dismiss. We want everyone to think the same but look completely different. We want everyone to think the same but look completely different. If you have a bunch of people that look completely different and also think in different ways, well, that's really hard to pit one group against another based on how they look. That's very hard to exploit for the acquisition of political power, isn't it? If you have a bunch of different people that look differently based on, color, ethnicity, where they're from, on the globe, but if they all think a little different about politics or about, they have maybe, a very a broad spectrum of how they interpret political events and things like that, well, that's really hard to exploit because it's much easier if you just say, hey, that person's a different color than you and they have more stuff than you, and so, there's a victim and oppressor here. That's why they have to define diversity only in looks and superficial things and not actually how you think. We don't teach critical thinking anymore. We don't. I was talking to a guy the other day, a friend of mine. I get to talk to him very often. We're talking about public education and how in a lot of ways they have, they're not really teaching how to question things anymore because it's just easier to get kids to comply. And if you were to teach, critical thinking in a lot of ways, it's, maybe you're going to be one of those citizens that questions your government. Anyway, 870-275-9799. That's the telephone number. Let us know what you think. Did you see the new James O'Keefe videos over at Project Veritas? They seem to be verifying the concept of a deep state. We've been talking about that. Anyway, we'll talk about this when we come back. More on this. And Joe, do you have those photos? You think you're looking for them? All right, we're going to go to break and be back here in just a moment.
And says this person did something awful in high school, and then the whole thing is over. I mean, no one will ever be confirmed to anything again. That's really where we're at now.
Yeah. Unless that letter is making an accusation against a liberal progressive that believes in an abortion, and then of course
then it would be dropped like a hot potato, like Keith Ellison, who is deputy chair of the DNC. Where there are credible abuse allegations, including a 911 call, and that was swept under the rug by the Democrats. So, I mean, they have a very selective sense of outrage about this, no question.
Yeah, and you have to ask this, and I can appreciate being delicate here, right? When it comes to this, well, I guess she's now 50. This woman's allegations here about what happened 35 years ago in high school, allegedly. But you got to wonder. I mean, Judge Kavanaugh has been a judge in a high court for a long time, and I know he's going to the highest court here in this situation. But why not come? I mean, if it was that big of a deal, and it affected you that much,
conservative legislation killed.
Or do you need policies enacted that ensure government growth?
Then you need to get
nephewed. Hi, I'm nephew number 1 of uncle, nephew, and nephew, attorneys at law. I'm not a lawyer, but I am a senator.
And I'm nephew number 2, and I am a lawyer and also a senator.
Are you the victim of a recent accident in which the voters in your community mistakenly elected a limited government conservative who is now actually implementing the ideas he or she campaigned on?
That's right, nephew number 1. Don't be a victim of democratic elections any longer. At Uncle, Nephew, and Nephew, we are committed to killing limited government legislation and promoting bills that increase the size of government by using any tool at our disposal.
Because sometimes the truth of the matter is, principles get in the way of pragmatism.
Just listen to some of our great testimonials.
Ever since I've been using the nephews, all my special interests have been served. As long as you make sure your contract says lobbying services are prohibited, then the legal services of uncle, nephew, and nephew are legal. Trust me, put the nephews on them.
It came out of nowhere. I was blindsided last election cycle when my well-funded and paid-for politician lost to some grassroots limited government voters. But then I hired the nephews, and they killed all the conservative policies the voters wanted. I got nephewed.
I got nephewed too, and so can you. Uncle, nephew, and nephew will accept compensation via campaign contributions. Put the nephews on them.
PHP Parody.
So, there is a photo out there. They're circulating a photo claiming that Christine Blasey Ford is this woman in a photo that says, "Not my president." It doesn't look anything like the other photos we have of Christine Blasey Ford. Now, that doesn't mean it's not her, but it just, I don't know. Doesn't really look like. Now, there's only that one photo of Christine Blasey Ford that is confirmed her. They're kind of using the same stock photo in all of the stories about who this is, the professor, from Palo Alto University or California or whatever. I don't know. To me, it doesn't look like it's the same person. So, but anyway, the fact of the matter is, look, this is this. You want to know what this is about? This is about Roe versus Wade. Period. This is about them attempting to delay this nomination so that they can try to take back the House of Representatives and impeach the president and stop him from making any other nominations. I mean, if they were to take back the House, you'll hear Democrats say the American people are now no longer with this president. He's illegitimate, and he doesn't need to exercise his constitutional authority anymore. And, who knows? Maybe they're hoping that they'll pull off some sort of miracle and take the Senate, which I don't think that's going to happen. I think the GOP might actually gain some seats in the Senate, but, who knows? This is about Roe versus Wade, isn't it? It has to be. I'm looking at all these celebrity activists, who are women who are now signing letter of support supporting Christine Blasey Ford and her accusations of what happened 35 years ago, that there was teenage Brett Kavanaugh somehow forced himself on her and she left. I mean, that's the accusation. This is about trying to save this concept of a woman's right to choose whether or not she wants to kill her child or keep her child. And I feel like that's what's being lost here. I don't really see anybody making that point. I haven't heard it yet. The left believes that pregnancy is not a biological condition. They believe that pregnancy is a disease that someone catches, that women catch, and it's unfair. It is fundamentally unfair that the plight of women is that they might catch a pregnancy, and that they, in their quest for equality, because men don't catch pregnancy, that they must have the right to choose themselves over the life of a child, a biological, at conception, a brand new, DNA structure that has all the code it will ever need to grow into a fully grown human being, that life needs to be, we have to have the right. That's what this delay of Brett Kavanaugh is all about. It is about the fight that we have been fighting for a long time, since 1974 in this country. And, the left, they're huge hypocrites on this, because the racial outcome that has resulted from the decision in 1974, when you look at how many African-American babies have been killed since 1974, it far outpaces the amount of Caucasian babies. I mean, and the statistics don't lie, especially, in New York. My goodness, somebody had done a study on that. They put up billboards that were deemed very offensive. Not to mention, you want to talk about discrimination of women. The babies, when they found out the gender of them, if you're a woman, then there's a high chance that people are going to have sex elective abortions based on, if it was a boy, we would have kept it, but it was a girl, so let's we don't want that. I mean, it has been a disastrous policy, not to mention just gravely immoral, but it's been disastrous, and that's what this is about. These people, they want to stop President Trump from reshaping the court, because you know what's going to happen. A state like Arkansas is going to pass a law that intentionally conflicts with Roe versus Wade to try to get somebody else to hear it, to try to get a new court to hear this and say, you know what? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You can't have liberty and you can't pursue your happiness if you don't first protect life. What do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. 870-275-9799. Pregnancy is not a disease. I think I heard former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee make that point once on his television show, actually. We got to take a break. Back in just a moment. Why wait till now unless I mean, I guess I'm saying if there's anybody out there that says, I can't believe you're not believing her, well, hang on now. Because the fact that she's just now coming out, you can't help but think that this is really just because of political differences.
Well, yes, don't forget that Judge Kavanaugh has been subjected to 6 FBI background investigations through the course of his career. 6. None of those FBI investigations ever turned up any of this over the course of all those years. No, none of them. You know, at some point they would have talked to people that Judge Kavanaugh knew in high school. There's no question. At some point. So where does this come from? I mean, we're right to question the timing and the validity. It's not. We're not saying this woman is making it up, but we're saying that, look, I mean, the circumstances are fishy.
Well, I think this is going to be a mess because she's now saying she is willing to testify publicly. And if that happens, I mean, you know, can you just imagine what the fake news media is going to do with this? I mean, they're going to run it live. They're going to replay it constantly. And what this is you can just see, this is an allergic reaction from the swamp, doing everything they can to make sure Donald Trump does not get another Supreme Court justice, does not get to pick another Supreme Court justice before the midterms. And
it's right out of the Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill playbook. I mean, there's no, except that now we're talking about high school. You know, I mean, really, I mean, next time it will be middle school, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really where we're going with this. It's just going to keep getting dumber every time.
I guess towards the end of last week when it was revealed that Dianne Feinstein, again, Senator Dianne Feinstein, who I want to remind everybody may in fact be a Chinese agent. I mean, she definitely had, you know, she's ignorant. I didn't know I employed somebody for decades, you know, that was my driver that was working for the Chinese government until the FBI told me. I swear I didn't know. But so Dianne Feinstein, she sits on this letter since June. And then the report that I read, Brian, said that the FBI, she referred it to the FBI. That was the headline, but the FBI says, we're not investigating this. Now that the accuser has come forward, I wonder if that might change.
Well, now, you know, when you have this Jeff Flake kind of situation where you have a couple of Republicans, I mean, it does seem like it changes the dynamic. But you're absolutely right about Dianne Feinstein, one of the least trustworthy people in the U.S. Senate, not just because her driver was a spy for China, but that her husband, Richard Blum, has been working, you know, has been closely tied with the Communist Party leaders in China for decades because of his business dealings. So, I mean, you know, really, this is a person who really should have left office a long time ago. Dianne Feinstein.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Yeah, so the delay tactic of Supreme Court, Brett Kavanaugh continues. I don't know what the left's wanting to accomplish other than delay the inevitable here. I mean, if they were to succeed in torpedoing the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh, do you think that they would – do you think that Trump is going to nominate someone who's not pro-life? Now, this is, of course, assuming that my initial speculation or hypothesis is correct, that this is about Roe versus Wade. This is about stopping the reversal of a genocide that's been going on in this country since 1974. As a matter of fact, there's a book written by theologian Francis Schaeffer, the late Francis Schaeffer. It's called How Should We Then Live? You've heard me talk about it many, many times. Francis Schaeffer is, well, he was well, I think way beyond his time when it comes to saying and you know, after the Roe versus Wade decision in 1974, Francis Schaeffer in his book says that the Christian consensus, he said this back in the 70s, was gone in this country. That, you know, because of what that Supreme Court did, that was the beginning. And it was such a, I mean, if you really think about it, we're talking about a life and death issue here, a life and death issue. And because they said that the Constitution guarantees a woman's right to kill her baby as long as it's in the womb, that clearly was a departure from a nation that had a Christian consensus in terms of a moral compass, right? And it really, if you really think about it, I mean, if you really study history and you study Baal worship, or you study what people used to do down in South America at the top of ziggurats when it comes to sacrifice, if you study those things, the decision 1974 put us on the path to be more like the nations of old than a nation that recognizes that God exists and that rights come from him, and that the supremacy of the state is not supreme. It is actually underneath a perfect creator. It was a clear deviation, that decision in 1974. And so Francis Schaeffer said, "Hey, look, Christian consensus is gone. I'm going to write this book. How should we then live? Because the Christian consensus is now gone, and it's not just. It wasn't only the Supreme Court decision in Roe versus Wade. It was a lot of things. But this was maybe the key indicator when we are now going to say, no, man is the judge of what's a life and what's not, and it's arbitrary, not based on conception. It's arbitrary. It's just man drawing new lines in the sand, and that's what we've continued to do, right? Well, because now we know a fetus can feel pain at 20 weeks, so now that needs to be the line. Well, now there's a heartbeat. Well, now that needs to be the line, and all those I think are good measures to try to save as many children as possible. But you can see, what that's gotten us. There were other factors too: the increasing violence, the increasing immorality in general in our society, and it is, it's certainly there. The idea was, okay, well then how, as a Christian, do you then live in a society that is going to have an ever-increasing government to try to deal with an immoral population, and then that immoral population continues to find ways around laws? Haven't we seen that here in Arkansas, too, when it comes to our politicians and them going to jail for stealing from us? And Judge Tim Brooks in the John Woods case said that the depravity of John Woods' heart, he referred to that phrase, the depravity of your heart, meaning John Woods was not remorseful. That's one of the reasons he got 18 years. And I think he's going to have to at least serve, 14 or 15 of it? If not the full thing, not the full term. I mean, it is, it's pretty wild. But this is what I think you need to know. The stalling of Brett Kavanaugh, the torpedoing of Brett Kavanaugh, and I think it's not, whether or not Christine Blasey Ford is right and being honest about what happened to her or not, it is still an act of torpedoing because they held on to this information for several months, okay? And that alone, I think, is, to pretend, to try to say otherwise is just putting your head in the sand. I mean, come on. This is about Roe versus Wade. This is about whether or not we're going to continue this practice. And it's low-hanging fruit. Back in the 90s, I've said this before. Remember back in the 90s, people of Arkansas thought abortion was fine. And now you may not have, but there was a lot of people that just thought, well, yeah, abortion's no big deal. It's fine. Don't talk about it. Shh, hush. We don't talk about these things. There are people sitting in church thinking they thought abortion was fine. That there was a gray area there. There's a lot of people that don't believe that anymore because there was an outreach, there was an educational effort, there was, people had to start communicating, the concept of conception and everything else. And now, of course, Arkansas is one of the most pro-life states in the nation. All right? Now, I hope one day, the economic issues, low taxes, less regulations, I actually hope there's an educational effort that goes out about that someday, and we can change the way a lot of people think nowadays about the government's role in our individual lives when it comes to that sort of thing. But that's that's a different battle here. So give me a phone call or send me a text, 870-275-9799. All right, let's start with this good news here. According to Michael Wickline over at the Democrat Gazette, they're going to put cameras in the Big Mac building. Meeting video stream backed. All right. So they essentially, the MAC building is actually an acronym for the Multi-Agency Complex. Now, this is a building that has, two pretty good-sized committee rooms in it. And when I say that, you have to understand, they have other committee rooms that are smaller in the Marble Palace, in the actual Capitol. But across the street in the Multi-Agency Complex, they have these other committee rooms that are bigger. They're broader. They got a lot of room. It looks more like your traditional, when you think of like a Washington, D.C. style with microphones and, you know what I mean? It's real nice. You know what I'm saying? You certainly would feel like you're somebody sitting in that committee room. But they don't have cameras there. Now, one of the reasons they don't have cameras there is because the Senate said no. See, the House, in their committee rooms back at the Marble Palace, they have cameras, microphones. They stream the video online live. Then they archive it so you can go back and you can look at how your legislator voted. Well, that's a whole nother. We're going to get to that in a minute. That's actually the next step that needs to happen after this. But it looks like that there is now motivation. There's now support to change the Senate rules to allow these cameras to go in the Senate buildings, the Senate committee rooms, rather, and also wire the MAC building, which would be very beneficial. They're looking at what the how much this is going to cost. I think it's totally worth the taxpayer money because we need transparency more than ever at the Marble Palace. Let's see here. The Joint Budget Committee and Legislative Council are among the legislative panels that meet in Room A at the MAC building, while the House Rules Committee, appointed by the House Speaker, is among the committees that meet in Room B. You've got other committees that meet there. Let's see. The projected cost of the full-time bureau employee and the session employee are $45,000 and $15,000 a year, respectively. Then you got a contract with Slick, $20,000 a year. If we were to stream it on our website, it could overload our General Assembly website, and we want people to be able to get to see the bills so much like the House does. The Bureau wants to contract with a streaming service, said Bureau Chief Director Marty Garrity. Honestly, the Arkansas legislative website in general, I'm talking about, the arkleg.com, whatever, is really not that great. I mean, it doesn't surprise me that it would overload because it's not good. It's hard to navigate. You have to really know. I mean, a lot of people, I get calls all the time. Hey, Paul, I'm trying to find this bill from a long time ago, and I can't find it. It doesn't work. I put the bill number in the search bar, and it doesn't work. And they don't know that you have to go all the way to the bottom of the page, and you have to find the little, the button that says previous legislatures. So you click on previous legislatures, and then it pulls up the different sessions that they've had over the years. And then you have to click on which session. And that's the other thing. You got to know which session that bill that you're trying to look up was in. And so then you click on it, and then a new page pops up, and then you put the bill number in. And if you're in the right session, you're going to find the bill you're looking for. But it's just not intuitive at all. So you have to really know what you're doing, in order to figure that stuff out. So let me see here. Yeah, I saw that stuff on here in the article about the right and the left. Yeah. So Michael Wickline writes that the Arkansas Senate is one of 9 in the country that don't provide video webcasts of their sessions in their chambers, although they provide live audio, according to the National Conference of State Legislatures. Over the past several years, some on the political right, ding, 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 and left have repeatedly called on social media for the Arkansas Senate to live stream its chamber and committee meetings. Well, I just want to say that the fact that we are here is because of you guys out there. So this is a very common sense idea that the Senate should be streaming things just like the House does, and that they should put cameras everywhere they do the people's business. And that means in the multi-agency complex, the MAC building, as well as everywhere else. When you do the public's business, you need to be on record, especially in this day and age where everybody's got a camera anyway. It's not, we need a record of what you're doing, right? Yes, we need more videos of James Sturch doing the Sturch Lurch, killing special election reform. We need more people to see what you guys are really doing down there. And yes, there's going to be more grandstanding, and there's going to be, but that's part of it. That's part of it. So, I just want to thank everybody out there for going on social media and for advocating for this, because it seems like they're listening. You know, when common sense is on your side, and common sense is very much on the side of when you're talking about transparency, at this point it is common sense, and it's something that resonates whether you're a Democrat or Republican, being able to look in on what they are doing, right? I mean, personally, I wish their emails were FOIA-able. I think that we should go that far, because they do a lot of government business on their government emails, and I don't think they should be allowed to do that without us seeing what they're doing. You know, that's just my point of view here, and it's because I don't trust them, right? And that's healthy. That's a healthy American skepticism, by the way, and it's a very American attitude to not trust people in positions of power. And we see what we've gotten with it, haven't we? Now, what's the next step? What is the next step? Well, the next step is another act of transparency, and it's common sense as well, and it's called record the vote. No. Not record via video and audio, although that's important. We now need you guys to record all legislative votes, meaning here is State Representative X, and he is from District Y, and he voted this way in committee. He voted yes on this. He voted no on this. He decided not to vote. He was absent. We want a printout. We want to be able to go to your website, and we want to be able to see every single vote you make in committee. We want to know if you did your job. We want to know how you did your job. We want to know if you were advocating for your constituents or not. You know, technically you're down there doing things. Everything you do down there is in your constituents' names. And we have a right to know how you voted. Not just on the floor, right? When you voted for something off the record to get it out of committee, but then you vote against it because you know your constituents wouldn't appreciate it on the floor. That happens all the time. So it looks like you were against the policy, but then you were integral in getting it to the floor in the first place. That kind of legislative sleight of hand has got to stop in the name of transparency, in the name of good government. It's weaselry. Is that a word? Weaselry? These guys are weasels, and they've got to be exposed. So now that we're getting them to stream everything and record everything online, now that we're getting that, we now also need them to record all committee votes, because as we'll see more and more, they're going to take voice votes, just like what they do. They take a voice vote. They don't, and whatever the chair hears, that's how it goes. You know? I said weaselry. Weaselly? So weaselly is a word, but I'm talking about I'm talking about being weaselry, not weaselly. Well, it turns out that putting cameras in the MAC building can be done weaselly. Can be done very weaselly. I can pull a George W. Bush. I can make up any word I want. So anyway, I totally lost what I was going with this. But, yeah, we got to record all committee votes, record all legislative votes. You know, they like to say that they're not legislating in the committee. That's where all the best debates happen, you know, is in those committee rooms. And doing the voice vote is just, with the technology we have these days, doing the voice vote doesn't make any sense, right? Paul, it'll slow the process down. Good. That should actually be the conservative legislator that suggests this. That should be the first thing on there. In order to slow, in the name of the deliberative process, in order to slow, yeah, Joe, in the name of public safety. For real, though, like in the interest of the public, in order to slow the legislative process down so we are able to vet, so the public is aware, so that if you guys are about to do something stupid like pass an odometer tax where you're taxed by the miles you drive on the road, we're able to stop up and jump up and down and stomp our feet and get you guys to back off of some an idea that is so idiotic. In the name of the public, yes, we're going to record every vote, and that will slow the process down. Thank goodness. Number 2, in the name of us being able to have the most information that we can when we go to vote for you again, we want to have the most information about what you did. And right now we have less because you guys don't record all votes. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Nay. That sounded the same. I'm going to rule that the ayes have it. And then it passes. Yes, they can call for a roll call vote. But a lot of times when you call for a roll call vote, you get ostracized or you get looked down at. I wish somebody would go down there and call a roll call vote every time. Every single time. You say roll call one more time, I'm shutting you down. The telephone number is 870-275-9799. Coming up at the top of the hour, we're going to go over the ballot initiatives one by one, step by step. We want to give you guys a comprehensive rundown of everything you'll be asked to vote on this November when it comes to adding to our statutes in our Constitution here in the state of Arkansas. Don't go anywhere. Back in just a moment.
If you believe the Second Amendment protects your right to defend your home with a firearm, where do you turn if the government confiscates your gun? To the courthouse. The Founding Fathers created your Seventh Amendment right to a civil jury to protect your freedoms. The courthouse is where you fight the overreaching hand of government. And the Brad Hendricks Law Firm is where the fight starts. Call the Brad Hendricks Law Firm at 501-221-0444. The Brad Hendricks Law Firm in Little Rock, standing ready using the Seventh Amendment to protect your Second Amendment rights.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, Contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
This point is absolutely ancient and just so entrenched in the swamp that it's a
Yeah, and I saw where even Ruth Bader Ginsburg was talking about how hyper-partisan the confirmation process is. And, we've really seen that. I mean, if you go back, a couple of decades, this used to be a very bipartisan process where you had people getting confirmed 90, with 90 yes votes. And now the margins are so thin because there are clearly two different philosophies on how to, interpret the Constitution of the United States, Brian.
Well, sure, one party wants to flush it down the toilet. That's their interpretation of the Constitution. There are two different ways of looking at it. One side values it and the other doesn't. So that's the bottom line here. But we are living in ridiculous times.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a good thing that we have the news out there that they're going to try to put these cameras and stuff in the MAC building. So very excited over that. It's a long time coming, but good for them. They need credit where credit is due, right? They need to be thanked when they do things that the people want. So thank you guys. This is a positive thing. I mean, I know we've been complaining. I know I want to record all committee votes. That's the next thing. But it's good that we at least have, that we're going to have, it looks like, a policy change which is going to allow for more transparency in what you guys are doing. And I'll be perfectly honest. I'm excited for the idea of being able to broadcast you guys Senate video and audio, to be able to show you, what they're doing in your name. There's a ton of stuff that goes on in that chamber that I have seen firsthand that I don't have a record of to show you. I mean, I can only tell you what I saw, and I don't necessarily have a perfect memory. So, the video doesn't lie, though. Seeing James Sturch get up right when he gets a text message after he had just voted for a policy, get up out of his seat so it'll fail. I mean, that's priceless. That is a priceless, that's a priceless example of truth and what actually happens. The Justice Department, ladies and gentlemen, has vowed to investigate after Project Veritas, that's James O'Keefe, has, with his hidden cameras, once again revealed corruption inside government. And this time it is proving the deep state's existence. The Department of Justice on Wednesday said it would look into allegations of misuse of government resources to advance personal interests after James O'Keefe's Project Veritas released a second video this week exposing deep state federal employees pursuing socialist agendas while on the clock at their government jobs. In the latest undercover video, Department of Justice paralegal and Democratic Socialists of America member Allison Harbar reveals that there's a lot of talk about how we can, resist from the inside. She discusses a fellow DSA member working from within the Department of Agriculture who is slowing down the process by which people are eliminated from the food stamp program. And this is just the beginning. Apparently, there's a lot of people that work for the United States government who are card-carrying members of the Democratic Socialists of America. Anyway, go look that up, Project Veritas. See it for yourself.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
Feinstein, who I want to remind everybody may in fact be a Chinese agent. I mean, she definitely had, she's ignorant. I didn't know I employed somebody for decades, that was my driver that was working for the Chinese government until the FBI told me. I swear I didn't know. But so Dianne Feinstein, she sits on this letter since June, and then the report that I read, Brian, said that the FBI, she referred it to the FBI. That was the headline, but the FBI says, we're not investigating this. Now that the accuser has come forward, I wonder if that might change.
Well, now, when you have this Jeff Flake kind of situation where you have a couple of Republicans, I mean, it does seem like it changes the dynamic. But you're absolutely right about Dianne Feinstein, one of the least trustworthy people in the U.S. Senate, not just because her driver was a spy for China, but that her husband, Richard Blum, has been working, has been closely tied with the Communist Party leaders in China for decades because of his business dealings. So, I mean, really, this is a person who really should have left office a long time ago. Dianne Feinstein at this point is absolutely ancient and just so entrenched in the swamp that it's a
Yeah, and I saw where even Ruth Bader Ginsburg was talking about how hyper-partisan the confirmation process is. And, we've really seen that. I mean, if you go back, a couple of decades, this used to be a very bipartisan process where you had people getting confirmed 90, with 90 yes votes. And now the margins are so thin because there are clearly two different philosophies on how to, interpret the Constitution of the United States, Brian.
Well, sure, one party wants to flush it down the toilet. That's their interpretation of the Constitution. There are two different ways of looking at it. One side values it and the other doesn't. So that's the bottom line here. But we are living in ridiculous times, and news, the fake news media has become more absurd than ever. But I mean, at some point, this is going to come back to haunt them because they're going to have a Democratic president, and who's going to want to confirm somebody to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they've opened the door for a lot of shenanigans here. So,
well, I'm just, I don't know what to do in this situation. Like, I don't know. Do you go ahead and have the vote anyway? And what are they going to do if you did? I mean, you talk about meltdown mode. And again, the American people, I think, see through this for exactly what it is. And I think they think this is absurd and ridiculous.
Look, this is a numbers game. It's about counting to 51, and that's the bottom line. If Jeff Flake or somebody is not going to vote, Susan Collins especially, if they come out and say, I'm not voting for this, then the thing, that it's effectively dead because you don't have the votes. So, well, the other issue, though, are the Democratic senators from red states. And how they're going to vote. But look, if they have Jeff Flake and other people providing cover for them, they'll go ahead and know as well. So if you don't have 51, then there's no point in proceeding with the vote. So Republicans the leadership doesn't have that much power over this. It all depends. But someone like Flake, we can't get rid of that guy fast enough.
Yeah. Okay, so if in fact this is now stalled and delayed, what does that mean about the midterm elections? I mean, that's got to be a motivator for those of us on the right to get out and vote.
Well, that's why our group, we have created a new super PAC called Red Wave America, and we're actually intervening in these races because we're so disgusted. Because our members, we have a group called Stop the Scalpings on Facebook. We have 111,000 members there, and they asked us to become more activists in nature. So we created a group which you can look up our page on Facebook called Red Wave. Just type that in one word.
Yeah, you broke up there, Brian, a little bit. You broke up there.
Yeah.
Red Wave, St. City.
Sure. So we have our new group, Red Wave America, and you just use the @ symbol and look us up on Facebook. So we're intervening in some of these races because, look, the left is trying to take down Ted Cruz in Texas with one of the sleaziest candidates they've put forward in a long time, this guy, Beto O'Rourke, who pretends to be Hispanic but isn't, and who's Irish American but pretends to be Hispanic with a name that's just a nickname that, he made up. So I mean this is the kind of what we're facing in 2018. This is ridiculous.
Brian Maloney.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us this morning. Hour number 2, and man, we got a lot of stuff to get to this hour. I want to talk first about the ballot initiatives. We're going to go through the different ballot initiatives that are going to be on your ballot when you go to vote this year. And so, Conduit for Action's put together a great, really, really good, comprehensive review here, and hopefully this video will be useful to you as we go through this. So let's get started here, okay? So the first thing you need to know is that there are two. Go to the next slide here. There are two types of ballot issues, okay? You have proposed constitutional amendments, amendments to the Arkansas Constitution. Then you're going to have initiated acts, which are an amendment or new state statute. Okay, those are the two types. You can have them proposed by the General Assembly. Okay, so the Arkansas General Assembly may refer up to 3 proposed constitutional amendments each legislative session. And this is, for us to vote on. The Arkansas General Assembly may refer statutes for the people to vote on in the next regular general election. The Attorney General, this is key, does not have to approve the ballot titles or popular names of the proposed amendments or statutes. Okay? Then you can have citizen petition initiatives, which we've seen a lot of those recently. You have a ballot question committees may secure signatures to place constitutional amendments or initiated acts. The number of signatures is based on the total number of votes cast in the previous election. For 2018, 67,887 valid signatures for initiated acts and 84,859 valid signatures for constitutional amendments. So, again, initiated acts would be new laws. Constitutional amendments would be, amendments to the Constitution. Pretty straightforward. Interesting difference here, though. The citizen petition initiatives, the Attorney General must review and approve the ballot titles and popular names for all citizen petition initiatives. But the Attorney General does not have to do that for the proposed amendments by the General Assembly. And that's sad because the people of Arkansas have been taken advantage of by our own elected officials. Of note would be convicted felon, going to do 18 years in prison, John Woods. All right, so here are the issues. You got issue 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Issue 1 is a cap on lawsuit damages, the bad tort reform bill. Issue 2 is voter ID. Issue 3 is strengthening term limits. Issue 4 is the casinos, and issue 5 is the minimum wage increase. Now, it's interesting to note, issue 1 is tied up in court right now. Issue 3 is tied up in court, and issue 4 is tied up in court. Okay? So the caps on lawsuit damages in court, strengthening term limits is in court, and casinos is in court. So it's possible, who knows, that none, on these issues that, you may go vote for them, but they may not count those votes because they may get thrown off the ballot. Certainly something to think about. Let's start at the top of the list, right? Let's start with issue 1. Issue 1 is a terrible idea for a lot of reasons. Man, I saw some propaganda out there of people saying, why issue 1 is so good, and the Facebook comments were just brutal. I mean, brutal, saying this is a terrible idea. I thought that was really good. Public opinion polls are saying that issue 1 is not going to do too hot at the polls, but you still got to vote against it. Issue 1 puts a cap on non-economic damages at $500,000. Non-economic damages, $500,000. So, I mean, if something happens to you and it's literally just your worst case scenario, $500,000 is all you're going to get for the rest of your life. It puts a cap on punitive damages set at greater of $500,000 or 3 times compensatory damages. Limits on contracts between attorneys and their clients, capping attorneys' fees to 1/3 of the net recovered in a civil lawsuit, which is ridiculous. This flies in the face of the right to contract. It flies in the face of, it's basically an income cap saying, Barack Obama said, I do think there's a point where you've made too much money. Okay? I mean, come on. This is America. Okay? It's still America for lawyers or attorneys, just like it's America for other people. Sky's the limit, okay? Profit's not a dirty word. That's one of the reasons. That may be because of my capitalist leanings. That may be the one part about this that I can't stand the most. And it's not that I'm not an attorney. It's not that I just think, look, it's a slippery slope. They come for attorneys. They're going to come for talk radio hosts at some point. And they're going to say, you're charging too much money for this ad. And I just and everybody, you're charging too much money for this service. I think that, I think you got to stand up for the principle of letting people contract and make as much money as somebody is agreeing for them to make, whether that's 30%, 40%, 50%, 80%. If you're contracting, it's on you. All right. Then it gives the state legislature the power over court rules of procedure and evidence. This is a big no-no. I mean, this is a violation of the separation of powers. It gives future legislators power to adjust caps and or annul or amend rules from the Arkansas Supreme Court. Translation, it allows us to politicize the rulemaking of specific court cases, class action cases. It's a terrible idea. Now, before we move on from issue 1, I want to read you a statement here. Okay, this is really, really good. This is Conduit for Action. Conduit for Action, a conservative pro-business nonprofit, is in favor of tort reform. However, Conduit for Action officially opposes the proposed constitutional amendment known as Issue 1 that will be on the Arkansas ballot. Conduit advocates for the benefits of limited government, individual liberty, and economic freedom with an emphasis on small business, but believe Issue 1 is in direct contradiction with these principles. While frivolous lawsuits hurt small business, Issue 1 does nothing to address frivolous lawsuits. CFA supports loser pay tort reform, but opposes Issue 1 as there is no loser pay tort reform language included. To argue they're going to add it later is a Trojan horse. What Issue 1 does include are the special liability protections for nursing homes, hospitals, and other big corporations and other special interests. Issue 1 allows politicians to put a cap on the value of human life if someone is injured or killed due to the negligence of another. Issue 1 limits the cost of being negligent at the expense of the innocent. Hear me. Issue 1 limits the cost of being negligent at the expense of the innocent. That is wrong, Republicans who support this. Issue 1 is anti-free market. It puts government in charge of setting the price that attorneys and clients can agree are reasonable fees for an attorney's work. Issue 1 limits the ability of both clients and attorneys to have freedom to contract. Ultimately, this will limit the ability for injured people to find an attorney to take their case against these special interest groups, which is the goal of the supporters of the ballot issue. Issue 1 undermines the balance of powers of 3 co-equal branches of government. It would allow the legislature to take over the rulemaking authority of the judicial branch. Legislators would be allowed to write rules of evidence and procedure for courts. This is a terrible idea that would see the courts be corrupted with lobbyists and special interests telling the legislators what rules to write for the courtroom, even rules intended to benefit cases that may be then pending against lobbyists' clients. Hello, McFly. Think, McFly, think. Issue 1 does nothing to help small business or provide economic growth in Arkansas. It's simply writing special protections for special interests into the Arkansas Constitution. Conduit for Action is proud to join with other conservative groups like Family Council and pro-life leaders like Rose Mims of Arkansas Right to Life in opposing this measure. Issue 1 does not help Arkansans and will not help the Arkansas economy nor create jobs. Conduit for Action encourages all voters to vote no on Issue 1 this fall. This is... Let me see here. Let's go to the next slide on this. So, who supports Issue 1? You have supporters of Issue 1, nursing homes and hospitals, the Trucking Association, Walmart and other corporations, the State Chamber of Commerce, insurance companies, the Poultry Federation. It says here, Americans for Prosperity. Okay, who opposes Issue 1? The Trial Lawyers Association, the Arkansas Bar Association, Family Council Action Committee, Conduit for Action, Rose Mims, officer with Arkansas Right to Life, and other pro-life advocates. Okay? Those are your groups. That's where it all falls down, really. And you could probably add some or, add some to both sides. But, I mean, that's essentially what we're talking about here. Just so you know who supports, who opposes. All right? Issue 1, I think we've covered it pretty thoroughly. It will not be the last time we cover it. Now, going down the ballot this November, you'll make your decision on Issue 1, and then you're going to go to Issue number 2. Issue number 2 is voter ID. It will require a valid photo ID in order to vote. It will empower the legislature to determine which types of ID that can be used. It will require the state to provide free ID to eligible voters. And you may cast a provisional ballot without a valid photo ID, which would be certified later after some sort of identification is produced. Now, this is really, really good. Now, there was an illegal immigrant. When I gave this presentation recently, there was an illegal immigrant question. I mean, like, okay, well, how? And that is where this is a big deal here. The legislature will be able to consider which form of ID is acceptable, right? So then it would go, let's say they say only a valid Arkansas ID. Okay, well, then you got to go to, okay, well, who are we giving these IDs to? What's the driver's license situation, how secure that is? You know what I mean? And you can tweak stuff here and there. I don't know, maybe a concealed carry license would be, also valid. Some sort of Arkansas ID to vote in Arkansas elections would certainly be reasonable, but you want to make sure that only citizens are allowed to get, the ID that you would then present. So that would fall on the legislature to make good policy to ensure that only citizens of Arkansas and this country are allowed to vote. And that's obviously where that authority should be, by the way. So it's not rocket science. Voter ID is a good thing. It protects the integrity of our elections. I certainly support voter ID, and that is Issue 2. So after you vote on Issue 2 for or against, you'll then move down to Issue 3, which is a little bit more controversial, to say the least. Issue 3, strengthening of term limits. This would shorten term limits for Arkansas state legislators to a 10-year max. House would be 3 2-year terms. The Senate would be 2 4-year terms. And any future changes to the term limits shall not be made by the legislature, only by the people in an initiated, signature gathering effort, if you will. A little bit of background here. Amendment 73 of 1994 was 3 2-year terms in the House and 2 4-year terms in the Senate. Then you have the Trojan Horse Amendment 94 of 2014, 10 years later. Convicted felon John Woods and the rest of the legislature duped the people. Now, not all of them, but you know what I'm saying, collectively. And then they increased it to 16 years in the legislature, which said that partial terms and 2-year terms in the Senate wouldn't count. And because of that, it was possible under the 16-year term limit in the legislature under the John Woods-initiated fraud that you could serve a potential, if you hit it right, drew the straws right, 22 years. A lot of people don't know that. Now I think the reverse would be true. If the 2018 ballot issue 3 passes, you're going to have 10 years in the legislature, max of 3 terms in the House, max of 2 4-year terms in the Senate. Partial terms of less than 1 year do not count. Okay. So anyway, it's controversial. Obviously, there's a lot of legislators. Listen, the fact is there's a ton of politicians that don't want this. Now, we could talk about that. I would say I'm not surprised. But at the same time, there are politicians who can make reasoned arguments, and I have said this as to why it's not a good thing, right? And I respect them. I've had them on the show. I'm going to have them on the show again, and we're going to talk about it, and it's going to be fine, and we're going to agree to disagree. I think 10 years is a good idea because I'm tired of what's going on, and I think a decade's long enough. That's just my opinion. And other people are going, to we're going to make the decision. The people are going to vote if this is tied up in court. There's a chance that this thing gets thrown out. There's a chance. And I actually have been told by people that I trust there's a ever-increasing chance that Issue 3 is going to get thrown out. So, you'll hear a big exhale and sigh of relief from the Marble Palace if that happens, let me tell you. And that's just because there's people who are going to have to go home. There's people that if this passes, they're already over the 10 years and they'll get to serve out the remainder of but they won't be able to run again. Okay, so after you make your decision on Issue 3, then you're going to go down to Issue number 4. Issue number 4, we're going to power through here. Issue number 4 would be casinos. This is also tied up in court, but it would add 2 new casinos in Arkansas, Pope County near Russellville, and in Jefferson County near Pine Bluff. It would allow expanded gambling at Oaklawn and Hot Springs and Southland in West Memphis. It would tax casino proceeds as follows: a 13% tax on the first $150 million, a 20% tax on receipts above $150 million, and it would be distributed as follows. 55% would go to state general revenue. 17.5% would go to Racing Commission for live horse and greyhound racing purses, 8% to counties in which the casino is located, and 19.5% to the city/town in which the casino is located. If it's not located in the town, then it would go to the county. Conduit Fraction opposes this. I think it's ridiculous because, you're going to put casinos into our Constitution. It's a very strange thing to me. And of course, I was reading the article because I did get this question at the presentation. What's the process going to be like? Well, it's going to be really bad. There's going to be bidding. You have I think the Cherokee Nation and other Native American tribes that are going to bid on whether or not they get to put the casino in Jefferson or Pope County. Folks, can you imagine? We've seen how corrupt the medical marijuana situation has been. Can you imagine how bad this would be? Okay, so after you make your decision on Issue 4, assuming it doesn't get thrown out either, you'll go down to Issue number 5. Issue 5 is an increase in the minimum wage. This is a terrible idea for a ton of reasons. It would increase the Arkansas minimum wage up to $11 per hour by 2021. It would go like this. In January 2019, it'd go to $9.25 an hour. January 2020, go to $10 an hour. And January 2021 would go to $11 an hour. The current minimum wage in Arkansas is $8.50 per hour. The highest state minimum wage currently is $11.50 in the state of Washington. This is a terrible idea. This is going to hurt the very people it claims to help. And there's a lot of people that I would encourage you to go educate as to why you need to vote against this minimum wage increase. It also is going to hurt small business. It's going to make jobs scarce. It doesn't mean that if you're not making minimum wage now, like say you're making above minimum wage, it doesn't mean that you're going to get a raise if everybody else gets a raise. It actually means you're going to be valued less. It means that prices are going to slowly go up. It's not good for workers. It's not good for this concept of trying to make yourself more valuable to get more elite skills than the next guy. Yeah, it's not good for the economy. No more cars have been sold or homes have been built from December 2018 to January 2019. They're just declaring that we have more prosperity when in fact you don't. It doesn't make any sense. Not to mention the government wants minimum wage increases because now that means they tax you more. They get more money. They're taxing you the same, but now you're making $11 instead of $8. They get more money out of that. That's why the government wants it, because it feeds the pig, if you will. Those are your issues. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Refer to this video again if you want to know more. We're going to take a break. Back in a moment. Again, starting the beginning of your week with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Please welcome back to the program. He's the co-founder of the Media Equality Project and editor-in-chief of MediaEqualizer.com. We've got Mr. Brian Maloney back with us. Brian, good morning to you, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So on Friday, I was prepping for our interview, Brian, and we were going to talk a little bit about, Dianne Feinstein and Brett Kavanaugh and, this letter that she's been sitting on since June and everything else. And I know we're still going to talk about that, but we've had some new developments because the accuser is now accusing the nominee for the Supreme Court, Brett Kavanaugh, of sexual misconduct. What do you make of this?
Well, I do think that you hit the correct point first there, and that is, what was Dianne Feinstein doing sitting on this thing? So now we've got this situation where, we can't proceed with this until this has been investigated. Well, Feinstein has had this for months.
Money, power, prestige, essence. Available now from aristocrats serving Arkansas. From Zenata Rhino Collection. The fragrance of backroom deals. Nepotism. The aroma of higher taxes. Subliminal deception. Deep state. Ace. Made right here in Arkansas by a taxpayer-funded Chinese factory. Every bottle carefully crafted for you. Gender neutral. Nothing says aristocrat like Essence of Bureaucrat. Essence of Bureaucrat by Asa.
Available now in the Marble Palace gift shop.
Paul Harrell parody.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thanks so much for being with us. We have, we're up against a hard break right now, aren't we? Okay, so when we come back, I want to do a little flashback here. So yeah, just stick with us. By the way, check out conduitnews.com if you haven't today. Not only are we broadcasting live at conduitnews.com, but you also catch up on some great stories and things that have happened across the state of Arkansas. And don't forget to subscribe to the Conduit for Conduit News newsletter that we send out. Sign up for our updates and everything else. That way, if you miss anything on the show, interviews, that sort of thing, you're going to get it at the end of the week in your inbox. All right, back in just a moment. Again, starting the beginning of your week with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Please welcome back to the program. He's the co-founder of the Media Equality Project and editor-in-chief of MediaEqualizer.com. We've got Mr. Brian Maloney back with us. Brian, good morning to you, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So on Friday, I was prepping for our interview, Brian, and we were going to talk a little bit about, Dianne Feinstein and Brett Kavanaugh and, this letter that she's been sitting on since June and everything else. And I know we're still going to talk about that, but we've had some new developments because the accuser is now accusing the nominee for the Supreme Court, Brett Kavanaugh, of sexual misconduct. What do you make of this?
Well, I do think that you hit the correct point first there, and that is, what was Dianne Feinstein doing sitting on this thing? So now we've got this situation where, we can't proceed with this until this has been investigated. Well, Feinstein has had this for months. And so now, conveniently, she drops this at the 11th hour when it can do the most political damage. And look, what Democrats are trying to do here is stall the vote until after the November election. That way they can win control of the U.S. Senate, win control of Congress, and then scuttle this whole thing. And then Trump will never get anyone he wants confirmed. So that's what all this is about, is trickery. So, am I going to be able to sit here and say that this didn't happen 35 years ago in high school or whatever? No. But, I mean, if you're able to look at this and not feel like it's become a theater of the absurd, I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's absolutely ridiculous what's going on.
Yeah, you are exactly right. I also think that there's probably some fundraising to some of this. I know a couple of weeks ago up at MediaEqualizer.com, back when Cory Booker was having his grandstanding Spartacus moment, they were sending out emails, fundraising, trying to, they want to run for president, some of these people.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question that all this has been an opportunity for, seeing which Democrat looks strongest going into 2020. So there's that. But I just think that Feinstein, I mean, she has no excuse, for sitting on something for 3 months and then dropping it when it's politically timed to this extent. So, but, I mean, the bottom line is that Kavanaugh has now had his reputation smeared. I don't know why anybody would ever want to be on the Supreme Court, run for president, run for office, do anything anymore, because it's all about trickery, and it's all about sliming people at the worst possible moment. And, I mean, think about it, we're actually now seriously talking about what Kavanaugh may or may not have done in high school. I mean, high school. So, I mean,
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
I see where I just was looking at some of the headlines. It's just not really that big of a deal, but I do think it's interesting that you have more of the old-timers of Saturday Night Live are speaking out of just really just how bad the show has gone, just how low the show has gone in terms of lowbrow, political humor. And it's just not comedy anymore. It's just all about politics. So, and I've seen, Rob Schneider, Norm Macdonald, these old guys. Norm's really, he's getting a lot in the press. But recently, one of the original cast members, I saw this just scrolled across that Chevy Chase has ripped Saturday Night Live. It's just the worst expletive humor. And I thought that was interesting, just how some of these people are realizing, from a performance standpoint, Alec Baldwin was nominated, I think, for an Emmy the way he portrays Donald Trump, but he didn't win it. and he was probably just nominated because people just love to make fun of Trump. But it is obvious. And if you look at some of the great presidential impressions on Saturday Night Live, Alec Baldwin's impression has got to be dead last, because it was either Norm or somebody said it's obvious that Alec Baldwin hates President Trump. And when that comes across in your performance, meaning while you're playing the president, it's obvious that you personally disdain the person that you are portraying. That goes against everything that the comedy used to be. But anyway, I just think it's interesting that it's not like Chevy Chase, I'm sure, is some rabid conservative or something. You're just recognizing the shift in entertainment, and this is why it's the same reason why I think a lot of stand-up comedians won't go to college campuses anymore, because of the snowflake mentality, the safe space mentality, where you just can't make observations and try to make people laugh anymore. And it's really disturbing. When what used to be considered art, what used to be considered performance art and acceptable, under the concept of freedom of speech, by the way, is now shifting based on the idea that somebody may get their feelings hurt. And if you do get your feelings hurt, then you should be allowed to then silence that with you disagree, that with which hurt your feelings. And it is very antithetical to the very concept of America and freedom, where my freedom ends where yours begins and that sort of thing. But if I don't pick your pocket or break your leg, then you don't have an argument against me. Freedom of speech is certainly under attack. I saw in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette where Betsy DeVos brought up the lawsuit that's currently going on with Arkansas State University and their free speech policies. Did you guys see that? Go look that up. Yeah, essentially she was remarking how, Arkansas State has a free speech policy. And I didn't realize it was actually said a long time ago, before all of this snowflake, back in like the late 90s, I think. But, it sets up the kind of a free speech zone, and you have to get everything okayed. And then, but basically there was a student who was trying to recruit for the Turning Point USA group. Turning Point USA, Candace Edwards, she's absolutely fantastic, and she's certainly a thorn in the left side because she's a conservative and she's black. And so they had this student at ASU who was saying, hey, look, when trying to recruit, want to pass out materials for Turning Point USA, you get shut down. Now there's a lawsuit. You have the Alliance Defending Freedom is representing this student against Arkansas State, and Betsy DeVos referenced that, and she was talking about the importance of free speech. And you have a lot of situations where, I mean, sure, some of the administration thought it was a good idea at the time to just try to control any potential controversies, but life is clearly controversial. We shouldn't be institutionalizing these kids to believe that the government can tell them where speech is acceptable and where speech isn't acceptable. And so, that's the whole point. And in light of the fact that you have universities all across the country now that are abandoning the idea of freedom of not just speech, but thoughts that may make someone uncomfortable. I've got to put a trigger warning out because this may trigger you. Give me a break, right? I mean, how are you preparing people to survive in the real world? I mean, we are essentially saying that it is okay to remain a toddler in your 20s, that you can throw a fit because something happens to you that's unfortunate or that you don't like, that if you throw a fit, people will solve it, that your mommy will come and make you feel better, the government will come and make you feel better. We're essentially telling these kids that it's okay to be a toddler and to exhibit toddler-like tantrums throughout your entire 20s. And let's not kid ourselves. That's obviously they want that to continue through your 30s until these guys start running, our bureaucracies. And then, good grief, the arbitrary, there is no way to to continue this line of thought and not reach the logical conclusion that in order for them to exist, everything at some point is going to have to be subjective, and they're going to have to reject all kinds of absolute truth and the very idea of it. Because, I mean, my goodness, look at how the sentiments of our culture change on a whim from one year to the next, or from 10 years to 10 years later, 10 years ago to now. It's incredible what's important to our society now, which was not as important. And notice we're so vain and arrogant that we think that we are constantly we're constantly bettering ourselves, right? So like it's now, if you go back and look at the attorney, Deborah Katz, who's representing Christine Blasey Taylor, the lady who Blasey Ford, rather. Christine Blasey Ford, who's making the accusations against Kavanaugh. You go back and look at what she said about the Paula Jones accusations on CNN, this attorney, and how, you don't need to believe this girl. I mean, she doesn't have a case in court. It's just Paula Jones accusations, Paula Jones' word against Bill Clinton. And that was perfectly acceptable, right? But now, no. This is a big deal. You have to take every accusation seriously. I noticed Juanita Broderick was out saying, you know what, the FBI should investigate my rape if they're going to investigate these claims of Christine Blasey Ford against Brett Kavanaugh that happened 35 years ago at some party that nobody can really remember any details of.
Yeah. So you were bringing up that our society thinks that we're constantly bettering ourselves. So most of these people would adhere to most scientific principles. The reason why I bring this up is because there's a scientific principle called, there's a concept called entropy, which is the idea that things are continually getting more chaotic and getting worse. That's the idea. So how can you constrain yourselves to most scientific principles and ignore this one and think we're getting better, like we're constantly bettering ourselves when we're clearly not? Our society is more, the American culture is more split and more divided than it's ever been. Mm-hmm. We have more things currently running around, just ideas, principles that are dividing us than unifying us. Mm-hmm. When this country was founded 200 plus years ago, we were more unified than we've ever been at that point, and things just got worse from there because things happened.
I think it's more. I mean, I that's definitely a linear thought. You can certainly make the argument about that, Joe, and I think that's a good point. I think it's just. I think the outrage of today. I think what we find acceptable today, we may find absolutely disdain it 10 years later, and vice versa. What we disdain now, we may find perfectly acceptable later. Right? I mean. And yet they claim that, well, people just like to think that we're the most civilized we've ever been, Whatever the popular thought is now, well, we're now the standard and we've now evolved to this standpoint or whatever. I like your point about entropy, though, because that is certainly a principle that you see in nature. I think you see it with the very DNA. Genetic entropy, I believe in, is very real. It's really the concept of death, a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. But anyway, yeah, you're exactly right. It's just interesting. I mean, think about this. Like, do you think do you think someday, right now, the society tells you that abortion is perfectly fine and everything's great? Society tells you that, but in 20, 50 years, will it be considered the equivalent of slavery, the way we think of slavery today? I mean, it's quite possible, and yet we would say, well, no, we're past slavery, and yet abortion is essentially the same thing slavery was. It's deciding who's a person and who's not under the Constitution. Fertilized egg, not a person under the Constitution, right? Outside of the womb, now you're a person. Yet we think we've evolved. We have these evolved sensibilities, and we're beyond slavery. We know that somebody shouldn't be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. Although now. But now we've really abandoned that, right? Because if you're white, you automatically need to be looked at with skepticism in our society. So we're actually reverting back. But we don't think we are. We think we are more civilized than we used to be, and yet we actually are barbarians in some instances. And it's just ludicrous to think otherwise. But anyway, it's, vanity is really what it is. Humanists. Okay, No. We're not going to break and reset. We're going to keep going with this. Okay, so here we go. We're going to do a little flashback here. So, speaking of free speech, we obviously have we've got audio of Senator Jim Hendren and video of Senator Jim Hendren at the Benton County Republican Committee, and he was complaining about Conduit, and he was saying that Conduit shouldn't be allowed to speak at committees. And do you have this audio? Let's go ahead and remind people of just the regular video. Go ahead and play the video.
As you said, as I said earlier, I spent a lot of time in the military, and I've been overseas to the Middle East 5 times in the last 5 or 6 years. And one of the most disturbing things for us in the military is when we have what we call insider attacks. And this happened a lot in Afghanistan. We would have people that we were training, Afghani nationals that we were training, who would put on the uniform of the coalition, who would take our supplies and our food and our training and then walk in with a suicide bomb or walk in and start shooting our own guys. I mean, it's bad enough to get shot by the enemy, but to get shot by your own team, it's inexcusable. It's so hard to understand. Well, we don't have anybody obviously shooting each other, but here's what we have in our Republican Party. In addition to an energized opponent who's found opponents for every one of our incumbents, we have some folks in our party who have put on our uniform, who've said they're Republicans, and after the primary is over, when we're supposed to come together, are continuing to attack our people. And I'm telling you, we've worked too hard to let that kind of stuff go on. I've lost some primaries, and it's not been easy, but you do the right thing and you get behind the winner and the nominee, and you do what you got to do to keep moving the ball down the field. But we've got groups, let me give you some specific examples, and I think you all know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to be shy, it's Conduit.
All right,
they have given money.
So it's Conduit. All right, just want to make sure. Reset that video. Joe, I want, first of all, there's been articles written about this. Okay, you expose people's voting records. You expose that they're not conservatives. You get compared to terrorists. Okay, that's what he's doing. He's comparing. We have the Senate Majority Leader, the incoming President Pro Tem, a guy who wants to lead us in the correct ethical direction, right? And yet we find out that John Woods approached him and asked for a bribe, and he went to the authorities, Jim Hendren did, and then wouldn't cooperate with the FBI to try to actually take John Woods. And in knowing that, he and his family then supported John Woods for re-election over a true conservative candidate like Sharon Lloyd. And now he wants to be the one to say, no, we'll reform our ethics in the Senate and we'll tattle on each other, when he wouldn't tattle about John Woods and expose the establishment. I mean, it's a complete lack of credibility, and he wants to complain about Conduit, and he wants to compare us to terrorists. So rewind the video, play it again for us, and add that music I was talking about. Yeah, do the thing I was talking about, Joe. Go ahead.
As you said, as I said earlier, I spent a lot of time in the military, and I've been overseas to the Middle East 5 times in the last 5 or 6 years. And one of the most disturbing things for us in the military is when we have what we call insider attacks. And this happened a lot in Afghanistan. We would have people that we were training, Afghani nationals that we were training, who would put on the uniform of the coalition, who would take our supplies and our food and our training, and then walk in with a suicide bomb or walk in and start shooting our own guys. I mean, it's bad enough to get shot by the enemy, but to get shot by your own team, it's inexcusable.
Conduit's
terrorist. So hard to understand. Well, we don't have anybody obviously shooting each other, but here's what we have in our Republican Party. In addition to an energized opponent who's found opponents for every one of our incumbents, we have some folks in our party who have put on our uniform, who said they're Republicans, and after the primary is over, when we're supposed to come together, are continuing to attack our people. And I'm telling you, we've worked too hard to let that kind of stuff go on. I've lost some primaries, and it's not been easy, but you do the right thing and you get behind the winner and the nominee, and you do what you got to do to keep moving the ball down the field. But we've got groups. Let me give you some specific examples, and I think you all know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to be shy. It's Conduit.
Yep.
They have given money, $5,400 to Charlene Fight's libertarian opponent, and in a fall election after the primary. They have spent hours attacking our Republican nominee, Bob Ballinger, in a Senate race against a Democrat and a Libertarian after the primary in this election season. They have had the Libertarian opponent against our Republican nominee for governor on their show numerous times, and they continue to trash our Republican nominee for governor. They have called this task force that I've talked about, that we spent a year trying to figure out how to cut taxes, a farce. They called the medical reform task force that I chaired, that we spent a year making reforms that saved the state hundreds of millions of dollars, literally over $800 million, a farce. And then they want to come and tell us they're on our team. Well, I hope that this county committee, because this is where the Republican Party, I believe, was built and began for this state, starts to take a stand against that kind of activity. To have people who want to do that come and speak to county committees, I think is inexcusable. It needs to be stopped.
I guess I'm just inexcusable. Go ahead, so you can cut the audio now. I just wanted to remind everybody that that's... Yes, I know. Be sympathetic. We can make an infomercial or something. I don't know. That is the incoming president pro temp of the Senate, the governor's nephew, saying that it's inexcusable to allow Conduit to speak at Republican county committees. Because one of the reasons is because I have interviewed a Libertarian candidate for governor, Mark West, 3 times. 3 times in the last year, I've interviewed Mark West, the Libertarian candidate for governor. And yes, I disagree with Asa on many, many, many things. Isn't that incredible? Don't allow them to speak. I mean, it's what's crazy is I thought the Republican Party is okay with, a free exchange of ideas and discussions. But anyway, you expose liberal voting records and you're going to get called a terrorist. That's obviously clear. By the way, while that was going on, I had some text messages from a listener here. This listener says, this is a grown-up temper tantrum. I love the music. Yes. Yeah, it is. We were just talking about little toddler temper tantrums. Okay, we're going to take a break. We're going to reset here. Thanks so much for listening. Good morning to everybody out there. Thanks for starting the beginning of your day, your Thursday, with us here. It's the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Back in a moment.
If you believe the Second Amendment protects your right to defend your home with a firearm, where do you turn if the government confiscates your gun? To the courthouse. The Founding Fathers created your 7th Amendment right to a civil jury to protect your freedoms. The courthouse is where you fight the overreaching hand of government, and the Brad Hendricks Law Firm is where the fight starts. Call the Brad Hendricks Law Firm at 501-221-0444. The Brad Hendricks Law Firm in Little Rock, standing ready using the 7th Amendment to protect your Second Amendment rights.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
If you can look at this and not shake your head in disbelief, I think we're in a very, very sad state of affairs.
No, there's no doubt that we are. So this is a delay tactic. I agree with you. That does sound right. They're trying to delay this because they know if they can torpedo his nomination, it's going to be a while before Donald Trump gets another one. It will be after the election, but before there's another nomination. What are your thoughts on this, Brian Maloney, in terms of, the vote, I believe, is scheduled for Thursday. You have one Republican, Jeff Flake, saying we don't need to vote, we need to delay it. What do you think? Or do you think they'll go ahead and stand firm? The White House, as of last night, was standing firm by Kavanaugh's denials, and they were going to move forward. What's Chuck Grassley going to do? What are you hearing?
Well, I think, notice how it is one of the most liberal Republicans in the U.S. Senate, Jeff Flake, one who's also on his way out the door, who was the first to jump out and say we need to delay this, almost in tandem with Democrats. I mean, it's like this whole thing was choreographed by the left ahead of time.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Tomorrow is Johnny Cash Friday, so you can send your requests. What do you want to hear? What Johnny Cash song do you want to hear tomorrow morning? Let me know. You can text us those requests at 870-275-9799 to kind of give you a rundown on the news from 6 o'clock. You have CNN's Jeffrey Toobin, who, it's CNN and it's Jeffrey Toobin, really who cares, but he did say that Kavanaugh's getting confirmed if this accuser doesn't testify. If Christine Blasey Ford doesn't actually come up and testify after these allegations, then, I mean, what are you supposed to do? You're going to have the vote, and you're going to have to confirm Kavanaugh. I mean, if this is her big deal, she's the one that's interjected herself here, all right? Also, you have the Justice Department that's vowed to investigate after not the Christine Blasey Ford stuff. They're vowing to investigate the Project Veritas videos that are going around, proving the deep state exists and is working against Donald Trump. Not only that, it's an alarming amount of Democratic Socialists of America who work for the federal government, who are there trying to, for example, hinder the reduction of people who are on food stamps or, work against, the president in the State Department. It's really, really proving this very idea of the deep state. And I'll refer you to yesterday. We talked with Fox News host Steve Hilton. He was on the program. And, he talked about his experience working within the United Kingdom government before he came to this country. And he said that, these people in the bureaucracies, they think it's their mission to stop politicians from enacting change in a bureaucratic system, that they believe that it is their mission to push back and say no. And so it's, at the very least, you have that going on. I would say that the characterization of a deep state, though, goes even further because, you might have that going on if you had a Republican like George W. Bush, but, in office or something like that, trying to reform this agency or that agency like a little bit, you would have that kind of pushback possibly. This is different. What is happening with President Donald Trump is this, whether you're on the left or whether you're on the right. President Donald Trump represents change, like he is not a status quo president at all, not from the left or from the right. And that is why you have this allergic reaction, because he legitimately, every politician runs and says they're not part of the system. Donald Trump really wasn't part of the system. I mean, look at it. Look at the reaction. I mean, it is a violent reaction from Washington, D.C., the media establishment, the deep state. of trying to do everything they can. You can see it from the leaks. I mean, you had a story the other day where the State Department didn't like a Trump appointee, and so what did they do? They solicited complaints. They said, please give us complaints about this new Trump appointee. Then they leaked those complaints to the Washington Post, and then you had Democrat senators asking the administration for clarification on that. I mean, it is manufactured controversy from the deep state. Project Veritas certainly making those claims of a deep state more credible. Arkansas, we'll see you tomorrow.